Hey, this is Dave DeCamp from antiwar.com. This is anti-war news for Monday, December 16th, 2024. All right, the first story at the top of antiwar.com today. Blinken confirms the U.S. is in contact with HTS. So Secretary of State Antony Blinken said Saturday that the U.S. has been in direct contact with Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, a U.S. designated terror organization that grew out of al-Qaeda in Syria. And this is the group that led the offensive that ousted Bashar al-Assad. And now HTS is essentially in charge of Syria. Blinken said on Saturday, quote, "Yes, we have been in contact with HTS and with other parties. Our message to the Syrian people is this: we want them to succeed and we're prepared to help them do so," end quote. So this is confirming there was earlier reports that the U.S. was in contact with HTS. And so Jilani, HTS and its leader, Abu Muhammad al-Jilani, they are now overseeing this new transitional government in Syria. Blinken and other U.S. officials, they've celebrated the regime change, the takeover by this al-Qaeda offshoot, and they've made clear that they're willing to work with Jilani and HTS despite their past, despite Jilani's past as an al-Qaeda leader, as a member of ISIS. And Jilani, he's been going by his real name now, which is Ahmad al-Shara. So we're starting to see that him referred to that in a lot of the news stories about him. So keep that in mind. And he's been presenting himself as a moderate in an effort to gain support from the West. I put in the usual background in this article because the context is very important. And so the Biden administration is reportedly considering removing the terrorist designation from HTS, which would allow the U.S. to provide significant aid to an HTS-led government. Blinken released a statement a few days ago outlining conditions for U.S. support. He said in that statement, quote, "The United States reaffirms its full support for a Syrian-led and Syrian-owned political transition. This transition process should lead to credible, inclusive, and non-sectarian governance that meets international standards of transparency and accountability," end quote. So while the U.S., they're being very flexible with HTS, with this terrorist designation, but they use these terrorist designations to justify horrific violence, like Israel's attacks in Gaza and Lebanon. They just always say, they're fighting a terrorist group, Hamas, what are you going to do? Same thing in Hezbollah. They justify these airstrikes on residential buildings that just completely level them and kill all these civilians. They justify in the name of that of fighting terrorism, even though it seems a lot like terrorism to me, what Israel's actually doing. But with HTS, with al-Qaeda, it's all out the window because they're happy with the regime change. They're happy that Assad is gone, and Israel is happy as well. All right, so the next one here, Israel to expand settlements in occupied Golan Heights. So on Sunday, the Israeli government approved a plan to surge the settler population of the Israeli-occupied Golan Heights, which comes after Israeli troops captured more land inside Syria following the downfall of Assad. So this plan, the Israeli government will spend $11 million to encourage the expansion of illegal settlements in the Golan Heights. The territory is currently populated by about 31,000 Jewish settlers and 24,000 mainly Druze Arab who consider themselves Syrian. So Netanyahu said in a statement, quote, "Strengthening the Golan is strengthening the state of Israel, and it is especially important at this time. We will continue to hold on to it, cause it to blossom, and settle in it," end quote. So Israel first captured the Golan Heights from Syria in 1967 and declared its sovereignty over the land in 1981. And that was not recognized. The annexation was not recognized by any country until the Trump administration recognized it in 2019. So still the U.S. is the only country that recognizes Israel's annexation. The rest of the world views the Golan Heights as Syria, as part of Syria. So since Assad fled Syria and HTS took over Damascus, Israel has launched hundreds of airstrikes, and they've taken control of that buffer zone that separated the occupied Golan Heights with the rest of Syria. And Israeli troops have gone further in. Over the weekend, they've been capturing more territory. They're said to be only 15 kilometers from Damascus now. So right now, the plan to expand these settlements in the Golan Heights applies only to the territory that Israel controlled before Assad's downfall. But there are signs that Israel could eventually settle the land that it recently seized, which settler groups already have their eye on. Settlers are already talking about building settlements on this land that they've just taken. And Israeli Defense Minister Israel Katz said on Friday that Israeli troops will remain in the territory, which includes Mount Hermon, through the winter. He said, quote, "Given what is happening in Syria, there is great security importance for us to remain on top of Mount Hermon, a strategic location overlooking Damascus," end quote. And the U.S. has backed this land grab, this Israeli land grab in Syria, claiming that it's defensive in nature somehow. And, you know, you see the hypocrisy here. Israel's all happy that Assad fell, saying that it was a blow to the Axis. But now they're also saying that there's these threats in Syria that justify taking this land. And same thing with the U.S. You know, they're celebrating the regime change, but also saying, you know, justifying what Israel's doing in the name of threats coming from Syria. All right, so the next one here, Israel launches more airstrikes in Syria. Israel launched dozens of airstrikes in Syria overnight Saturday into Sunday, despite the new de facto leader of the country, Abu Muhammad al-Julani, saying that his group, HTS, was not interested in a conflict with Israel. So Israeli warplanes carried out 60 strikes on Syria within 5 hours, and this was Saturday night into Sunday morning. This brought the total number of Israeli attacks since Assad was ousted to about 800. So just a huge number of airstrikes. Before Israel carried out its latest round of strikes, Julani criticized Israel's recent actions, but said that he didn't want to fight. He said, quote, "We are not about to engage in a conflict with Israel," end quote. So he said that on Saturday during the day, and then that night Israel launched 60 more airstrikes in Syria. And Julani saying that Israel's arguments for attacking Syria no longer exist because Iran and Hezbollah no longer have a foothold in the country. Hezbollah Secretary General Naim Qassem acknowledged on Sunday that the Lebanese group lost its supply lines in Syria due to the regime change. He said, quote, "Yes, Hezbollah has lost the military supply route through Syria at this stage, but this loss is a detail in the resistance's work," end quote. So you see this map here from South Front. You see the blue is Israeli-controlled, Israeli-occupied territory, and this has expanded. They're moving further east into southern Syria. And, you know, again, Israel does not have a history of giving up, occupied territory. You know, if they plan to stay here through the winter, that's a sign that they don't plan to give this territory up at all. And then I just mentioned that they've taken more territory. So Al-Mayadeen reported on Sunday that Israeli troops are expanding their occupation of the southwestern province of Quneitra. The report said Israeli troops are only about 15 kilometers from Damascus. I think I said that in the last story too. Sorry. All right, so the next one here, the U.S. assures the SDF after Turkey says that its goal is to wipe them out. So this article is from Jason Ditz. So after substantial fighting over the city of Manbij and a 4-day truce, so this is fighting between the SDF, the Kurdish SDF, which is the U.S.-backed force, and the Turkish-backed Syrian National Army. So there was a 4-day truce conditioned on the SDF removing themselves and their families from the area. But the ceasefire does not seem like it's really holding very well. There's been more fighting. Secretary of State Antony Blinken was in Turkey on Friday to meet with Foreign Minister Hakan Fidan, with the talks including considerable discussion on post-Assad Syria. Just hours later, the Turkish Foreign Minister, hours after that he met with Blinken, made a live TV broadcast in which he declared that Turkey's strategic goal was the elimination of the YPG. And the YPG is the SDF. That is the largest group within the SDF that controls the military wing. So after meeting with Blinken, he says that their goal is to eliminate the U.S.'s ally in northeast Syria. And it suggests that the meeting with Blinken did not go very well. So, and apparently the U.S. has given the SDF some assurances that they don't actually face an existential threat from Turkey. They also gave them assurances that they don't face threats from HTS as well. So it seems like they're going to bat for HTS. But it's just kind of a mess here. And this is one area, again, it just goes to show the insanity of U.S. foreign policy. On one side, you have Turkey, which is a NATO ally. And then on the other side, you have this Kurdish group that's an offshoot of the PKK, which both Turkey and the U.S. consider to be a terrorist organization. And then further west a little bit, you have the HTS and then the Syrian National Army. It's just all such a mess. The answer is to, and there's U.S. troops there, so obviously the answer to this mess is to get out and not be involved, but that's never an option for the U.S. empire. All right, so the next one here, Netanyahu and Trump discuss victory against Iran. So on Sunday, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said that he spoke with President-elect Donald Trump about Israel's need to achieve victory against Iran and its allies in the region. Netanyahu said, quote, "I unequivocally declare to Hezbollah and to Iran, in order to prevent you from attacking us, we will continue to take action against you as necessary in every arena and at all times. I discussed all of this last night with my friend, the U.S. President-elect Donald Trump. We had a very friendly, warm, and important discussion. We discussed the need to complete Israel's victory, and we spoke at length about the efforts we are making to free our hostages," end quote. So the conversation between Netanyahu and Trump came after reports said that Israel sees an opportunity to bomb Iran following the regime change in Syria that ousted Assad. And there was also a Wall Street Journal report over the weekend that said the Trump transition team is discussing the idea of strikes on Iran's nuclear facilities. And we'll get into that more in the next story here. So, of course, the pretext is the pretext for bombing Iran's nuclear facilities would be, they're trying to build a bomb. But as we've seen, there's no evidence that Tehran has made any kind of decision like that or that they're actually going to take that step. So Netanyahu also said on Sunday that Israel was changing the face of the Middle East. He said, quote, "Syria is not the same. Lebanon is not the same. Lebanon. Gaza is not the same Gaza. And the head of the axis, Iran, is not the same Iran. It has also felt the might of our arm," end quote. He also claimed that Israel has no interest in a conflict with Syria. I mean, after he bombed the country 800 times, he says he doesn't want a conflict. He also says he doesn't want to interfere with their affairs, launching all those airstrikes and stealing their territory. All right, so the next one here, Trump transition team considering strikes on Iran. So this is one from Kyle Anselo, and he wrote this up on Friday. So strikes on Iranian nuclear facilities are being seriously considered within the Donald Trump transition team, according to the Wall Street Journal. While there is no proof that Tehran is trying to make a nuclear weapon, Washington and Tel Aviv are threatening to attack Iran's nuclear energy infrastructure. The Wall Street Journal reported, quote, "The military strike option against nuclear facilities is now under more serious review by some members of his transition team. Iran's weakened regional position and recent revelations of Tehran's burgeoning nuclear work have turbocharged sensitive internal discussions," transition officials said, end quote. So then Kyle mentions a report about Israel saying that they see this now, an opportune time to bomb Iran, to go launch strikes on the nuclear facilities after the regime change in Syria. And the Wall Street Journal report says that Trump and Netanyahu recently discussed this idea. And, this is separate from the conversation that they just had. This was reported on Friday. Netanyahu said that him and Trump talked on Saturday. So this is definitely concerning to see. There's certainly a bunch of Iran hawks in this that are going to be in this new Trump administration. Just about everybody's an Iran hawk that he's put in senior level positions. Maybe not Tulsi Gabbard, but she's kind of changed over the past year. So I don't really know. But it's, the fact that we're seeing reports of Israel talking about bombing Iran and now the incoming administration is considering it. And, people might say, Trump's not going to start a new war with Iran. But, this report is believable because look at who he's picked so far, the transition team. Again, it's all these Iran hawks, especially if Brian Hook is the official filling out the State Department. I mean, he's a huge Iran hawk. So I am almost certain that these conversations are happening. And we've even seen Trump himself say that Israel should, hit the nuclear sites if they're going to bomb Iran. That was in response to Biden saying that he told Israel not to target the nuclear sites. So, all right. So the next one here, Israeli attack on school in South Gaza kills 20. So on Sunday night, an Israeli strike on a school sheltering displaced Palestinians in southern Gaza killed at least 20 people. There's a pretty rough picture here in this story. And that the death include children. We don't know the exact number here. But according to the Palestinian news agency Wafa, the strike hit a UN-run school in western Khan Yunis near the Nasser Medical Complex. The breakdown of the casualties is unclear, but photos and videos of the aftermath show children among the dead and the wounded. So Israeli forces also attacked another school sheltering Palestinians in Beit Hanun, northern Gaza. That killed at least 15. And I got these mixed up. I wrote, I had to update this story because I wrote it about the school in Khan Yunis being targeted on Sunday night. And I saw the other story about the one in Beit Hanun, but in my mind mixed it up and I thought it was the same thing. But no, they attacked another school sheltering Palestinians on the same day. This is in northern Gaza, in one of these cities that's been under total siege as part of the ethnic cleansing campaign that they're carrying out. And in that strike, at least 15 people were killed, and among the dead was a family of 4, including 2 children. Israeli strikes also targeted central Gaza's Nuseirat refugee camp, killing a journalist and 5 civil defense workers. And the journalist, according to Gaza's government media office, the journalist who was Ahmad al-Lu, he's a cameraman for Al Jazeera. His death brings the total number of journalists killed by Israeli attacks in Gaza to 196. Just a huge number. And he was, according to Al Jazeera, he was the 3rd journalist to be killed within 24 hours. So this is just how widespread the killing of journalists is in Gaza. I mean, it seems so common now. So just in one day, they bombed 2 schools, sheltering people, killed the journalists, killed rescue workers, just absolute horror show every day. And Gaza's health ministry, they said in their daily update that at least 46 Palestinians were killed in the previous 24-hour period. Just completely, just relentless, nonstop slaughter, funded and supported and enabled by the U.S. government. All right, so the next one here, Gaza aid close to all-time lows despite the U.S. warning Israel. So this article is from Financial Times. Aid to Gaza remains close to all-time lows 1 month after the U.S. said it would not halt arms transfers to Israel because it had seen some progress in enabling humanitarian aid to reach the shattered enclave. Washington said at the time that it expected Israel to further improve conditions for Palestinians in the besieged Strip, but humanitarian officials say conditions have worsened as looting nearly choked off supplies from the main aid access points, and Israeli forces killed Palestinians guarding convoys against theft. About 1,700 trucks entered the enclave in the month to December 12th. So since the U.S. said, if you remember how this went down, the U.S. gave Israel a letter saying, in 30 days, you better increase aid deliveries into Gaza or else something might happen. There was no explicit threat, really. They just said there might be implications under U.S. foreign assistance laws related to military aid. These foreign assistance laws prohibit aid to countries that block humanitarian aid or commit war crimes with U.S. weapons, and Israel's obviously doing both of those things. But anyway, so the 30 days came up and the U.S. said, there's not going to be any consequences. They claim that they saw some improvements, but since then, it's about 1,700. It's been 1,700 trucks in a month. That's about 56 per day. In the letter, the U.S. said that Israel needed to get up to 350 trucks per day. So just not even close, not even within just not even anywhere near close what the U.S. was saying they wanted Israel to do. But it doesn't matter. The weapons continue to flow here. And so that 1,700 trucks, that was just 100 more trucks than the preceding month. And that was the lowest all time. So, things have just gotten worse since the U.S. sent that letter. So UNRWA officials said that they're at the point where they're lucky if they just get half a truck inside, and people can't have one day where they just know that their family will eat. Central and South Gaza, where most residents now live, have faced deepening hunger. Bakeries have been overrun by desperate Palestinians, with some even crushed to death. 3 people were suffocated in a November 29th incident in a food line in central Gaza. Flour is so scarce that one sack costs about $162. So just a terrible situation when it comes to the aid and the food aid. And it doesn't matter. The U.S. is going to keep arming Israel and ensure that this continues. All right, so the next one here, Israel to deploy autonomous weapons to the West Bank. So this article is from Kyle Anzalone at the Libertarian Institute. The Israeli Defense Forces are preparing to place dozens of weapon systems across the West Bank that can be operated automatically or remotely. According to a report from the Israeli Army radio station, the Samson remote-controlled weapons station will be deployed to dozens of checkpoints, settlement entrances, and key control points. It will be the first deployment of the system that is capable of firing lethal rounds without human intervention. So basically, armed robots are going to be at checkpoints in the West Bank. The IDF previously used the Samson system, which can fire pretty serious heavy rounds here, and they have used them on the Israeli border with Gaza. Since October 7th, Israel has conducted a large number of military operations in the West Bank, killing more than 800 Palestinians. Israel has also stepped up its expansion of Jewish settlements and the destruction of Palestinian homes in the occupied territory. And the Israeli policy of increasing raids, building Israeli-only settlements, and destruction of homes has led to more conflict between armed Palestinians and the occupation forces. And you have Israeli officials talking about wanting to annex the West Bank, saying they view Trump as an opportunity to do that. So the next one here, Palestinian Authority troops launched deadly raid of West Bank's Jenin. So this article is from The Cradle. So Palestinian Authority troops launched a deadly operation in the occupied West Bank's Jenin refugee camp during the early hours of December 14th, killing Yazid Jaiseh, a commander in the Jenin Brigades, the local branch of the Palestinian Islamic Jihad's Quds Brigades. So the PA Security Forces spokesman, Brigadier General Anwar Rajab, said the operation, launched in close coordination with the Israeli army, aims to, quote, preserve security and civil peace, establishing the rule of law, and ending strife and chaos, end quote. So Rajab added that the goal of Ramallah and Tel Aviv is, quote, reclaiming Jenin camp from the control of outlaws who have made life miserable for citizens and deprived them of their right to receive public services freely and safely, end quote. During Saturday's raids, PA bullets also killed a Palestinian child, Mohammed al-Amer. So this is the Palestinian Authority trying to crack down on the Palestinian resistance groups, the armed groups, in Jenin, and Jenin has been the site of a whole bunch of Israeli raids over the past year, and before that, Israel stepped up its raids in Jenin, a couple years ago when this current Netanyahu government came into power, and so the Palestinian Islamic Jihad said in response, quote, the targeting of resistance groups by the authorities in Jenin aligns entirely with the aggression and criminality of the Israeli occupation, end quote. So the Palestinians have been very fed up with the Palestinian Authority for years. They've done nothing really to protect them from the encroaching Israeli settlers and Israeli military. And I think right now, with what the current government, these Israeli ministers, what they have in mind for the West Bank, I think Palestinians fighting each other is, they're going to try to capitalize on this. To create more chaos in the West Bank, to give them more room to maneuver, to do their own operations, and to use the violence and the as a to advance their own agenda. So definitely something to keep an eye on here. And there's a report from Axios saying that the U.S. is asking Israel to give the Palestinian Authority military aid for these raids and operations. All right, so the next one here, Hungary. This is the last story. Hungary pushes Russia-Ukraine Christmas truce. So Hungarian officials have said they're still pushing for a Christmas ceasefire and prisoner exchange between Russia and Ukraine, despite a rejection from Zelensky. Last week, Hungary's Prime Minister Viktor Orban said that he had proposed a Christmas truce, but Zelensky shot it down. Orban said on Friday that Russia had agreed to the proposal and he thought it was still possible. He said, quote, "One of the parties agreed and the other apparently refused, but the possibility is still there. Let's stop the war, which has led to nothing for at least a few days," end quote. So Hungary's foreign minister also said that Hungary was still pushing for a ceasefire and that Russian officials responded positively. He said, quote, "We told President Vladimir Putin about that and informed several Russian government officials who responded positively and openly, showing their willingness to consider the proposal and negotiate. Unfortunately, the Ukrainian president rejected this opportunity for talks, but we hope that common sense and humanism will somehow prevail and as many people as possible will be able to celebrate Christmas in quiet, calm, and safety at home in Eastern Europe," end quote. During the first year of the war, Russia proposed a truce for Christmas, which is celebrated by Russian Orthodox Christians on January 7th, but that idea was rejected by both Ukraine and the U.S. I'm curious if the U.S. was asked about this idea, what they would say. I'm sure that they would reject it in some way. And then the question is, when would the Christmas truce be? Would it be January 7th when the Eastern Orthodox Christians celebrated? I know in Ukraine, they made it like the official public holiday. They changed it because a lot of Orthodox Christians in Ukraine celebrated on January 7th, but they've changed the official date to December 25th. I'm not sure, there's the split in the Orthodox Church. The main one that has historic ties to Russia celebrated it on January 7th. I'm not sure if people have changed or whatnot, but that's kind of part of the westernization of Ukraine, was changing that Christmas celebration to when Western Christians celebrate it. But anyway, so I'm not sure because Christmas is coming up. Christmas is next week, but then the Orthodox Christmas is a little ways down the road. So I hope that there's some sort of chance for this to actually happen, but I just haven't seen, doesn't seem like Ukraine is really interested at all. All right, so that is it for the news for today. Please go check out our Viewpoints. One from Michelle J. Kinnikin. Deadly USS Liberty attack records remain secret for now. It's a good article about the fight to get, FOIA requests to get information concerning the attack on the USS Liberty in 1967, an attack which was launched by Israel during the Six-Day War. And this is something that has been really covered up by the U.S. government. The claim is that it was a mistake, but the evidence shows that it was clearly intentional. And I'm happy that we publish this now because people are talking about the Liberty. Candace Owens just interviewed a survivor of the attack, and her show on YouTube has like 4.5 million views the last time I checked, which is just, that's huge. So a lot of people are talking about this. So I'm happy we got to publish this. Definitely go check out this article. One from David Stockman, the Syria fiasco. One from Matthew Petty, the war in Gaza is far worse than you thought. One from Judge Napolitano, will Donald Trump stop domestic spying? And one from John McGleon, how Washington engineered the Ukraine crisis. So please go check all of that out. Check out our blog. Lots of good stuff over there. I hope everybody had a good weekend. So speaking of Christmas, we were just talking about it. Next week is Christmas. I mentioned it, but I'll mention it again. I'm going to take off Christmas Eve and Christmas Day, and the way the schedule works out, next week there's going to be a Monday and a Tuesday show, and then I take off for Christmas, and then I'll work one more day that week and put out a show for Friday. So there will be 3 shows next week with a break in the middle for Christmas. So let's pray for peace for Christmas. Let's hope that there's a ceasefire, in Ukraine, maybe somewhere else. Anyway, I hope everyone had a good weekend. I will be back tomorrow with some more news. Thanks for listening.